Yes, which was then later promulgated on the 27th of the same month. So as we mark 14 years of this constitution in a couple of days, we want to have these conversations about what's happened in the Katiba. We have seen very many things happen in the Constitution. Some of those milestones, of course, the first milestones were the enactment of the laws that brought in the Constitution, the establishment of the Constitution Implementation Commission, or as it was properly called, the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution. The laws they drafted and Parliament being made by law to work extra hard and extra fast to enact these laws that bring the Constitution to life. We saw then the establishment of a new judicial structure with the Judicial Services Commission and the Supreme Court. We saw the vetting of judges and magistrates. We saw the vetting of police in a bid to reforming the police from police force to police service. We saw the establishment of constitutional commissions and the rigorous vetting process that happened as those commissions were being set up. Then we saw the first election under the Constitution in 2013, which then ushered in the new offices that we have. We saw county governments being established after 2013. We saw the county assemblies getting now proper mandate. We saw the county executives, the legislative arms of government, a bicameral parliament returning. So things happened at the onset of the Constitution, and then as the implementation of the Constitution happened, a lot of things have happened. I think what we are seeing now this year is the coming to life of the citizen agency in the Constitution. From what we've seen in the last couple of months, with a raised awareness of civic issues led by the younger populations, being adopted by all populations, issues of accountability now being raised, and that's what we want to discuss today. And that's why we invited two people who are very, very active on this. Morara Kebaso, who, as you've seen, those who have seen him, follow him online. Morara Kebaso is a lawyer and is a trained lawyer and has now taken up the issue of a civic educator. He's a politician to the core. He has been active and actively engaged in student leadership, in leadership outside of university. He's a businessman, and he's recently decided to take up the mantle of putting accountability to the wire and to the test. And using the support of the public and using his own time, his own resources, has decided, let's actually interrogate what we are seeing in terms of value for money from people. So Morara Kebaso is going to be one of our speakers. Morara, thank you for joining us. I've invited you to be a speaker, so just check your link and you accept to be a speaker. We are also going to hear from Betty Okero. Betty has been in this journey for a while. She's a governance and women's rights practitioner. She has been in civil society space, advocating for better governance and all matters of better civic engagement and, again, the value for money. We're also going to hear from Boni Mwangi, an economist, certified public accountant, who has also taken up his time, his efforts in auditing and just scrutinizing expenditure, looking at budgets and particularly focusing on counties, looking at expenditures, looking at own source revenue and other sources of monies that have gone into counties, and then auditing the actual value for money for the projects that have either been initiated or how the counties have been spending their monies as well. So Boni is also going to be our speaker. I've also invited you to be a speaker, so just accept the invitation, and then we are going to have you speaking as well. So Boni Mwangi, check your invitation for speaker, accept it. Morara has also received that. He's a speaker, he's accepted, and then we're going to start the conversation shortly. And then as we have this conversation, it's of course it's an X space. X space is a public conversations that take place, so that all of us can engage. Our other speaker on the panel is Annette Nerima. She's a public finance practitioner. She'll also come and give us perspectives of what she's been in the civil society space as well for a while, as the Kenya Human Rights Commission. and she'll also speak to us, and we hear her perspectives on what we have seen, what the public has been asking for, whether we are getting value for money for what the public has been agitating. So thank you everybody for joining us. More and more people are joining in, and the conversation will continue as we go along. I want to invite the first person to speak to be Annette Narima. Annette, you have obviously been in this sort of civil society space for a while. Throughout the implementation of the Constitution, you have seen what people have been agitating for, from what's expected, what the letter and spirit of the Constitution was saying, particularly matters of public finance management, and how the Constitution basically brought in a revolution on how our money is spent, and the levels of accountability that are there in the money. Even introducing properly structured gatekeepers, and they're called independent officers. You've got a controller of budgets, you've got a very, very independent office of the Auditor General, you have other ways of accounting for this money. If you just look back, Annette, over the last 14 years, what are your perspectives on this, on how then our accountability has gone? Over to you, Annette.
Thank you, Latif, and good evening to everyone that has made it to this space this evening. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Great. So thank you so much. And happy birthday to the Constitution, because on the 27th of August, that's next week on Tuesday, the Constitution will be 14 years. And so as we commemorate Katiba at 14, it's time to look back and ask ourselves, a 14-year child is one that knows right and wrong. A 14-year child knows the direction they're headed. A 14-year child, has really formed to a point where we know the direction it's taking. We know whether it's a good child or a bad child. We know how to direct it if at all it's not taking the right direction. And so I believe right now as Kenyans, we are clear that the Constitution is either working or it's not working. If we are to go with the recent happenings, we can honestly say it's not headed in the right direction. We can authoritatively say that whatever we see happening as regards governance is not what was envisioned in the Constitution. And so looking at the accountability question, which is very crucial in matters governance, and also those that are bestowed the responsibility to ensure good governance, it's very crucial, because what it does is it fosters trust and also ensures that ethical behavior is also maintained. And at the end of the day, we end up seeing leadership. So when we talk about the Constitution, it came into being and put in place frameworks and even institutions that were designed to promote transparency and also accountability, and in the context of public finance, just prevent the misuse of power, and also which has then a bearing on the mismanagement of public resources. But we end up asking ourselves at this particular moment, some of the institutions that were set or put in place, including the independent officers under Chapter 15 that Latif you've talked about, are they performing above or are they discharging their mandate as they ought to have? We also have institutions such as that of National Assembly, the Senate as well. We have the county assemblies at county level, the executive at both national and at the county level, which broadly, if they are well coordinated, well funded, then it was the expectation of the people and that of the Constitution that would have good governance in the sense that public resources would be put into good use so that they benefit the ordinary Kenyan. They allow for effective functioning of devolution, which is also provided for under that Constitution. But 14 years down the line, is this what we are seeing happening? And we'll just substantiate this with some good examples. For example, we have these independent fiscal offices, like that of the control of budget. So the control of budget basically looks at both county governments and national government MDAs, ensuring that they adhere to the public finance management framework in their operations as regards planning and even budgeting. But then we see that there has still been a struggle. We still see that when you talk about budgets, they are not in the interest of the people. And I would give a good example. The law under the Public Finance Management Act, Section 107 and also 15, 15 that's at the national government and 107 at the county government, requires that at least 30% of the revenues are set aside to support matters development, and not more than 70 goes towards recurrent. And so what we have ended up seeing happening is that county governments and also at national government playing and trying to beat the law, because the law said at least 30% in terms of allocation. They end up allocating, it's approved, but then come up with supplementary budgets. With this supplementary budget, they end up removing monies from development and also taking it back towards recurrent. So what we end up seeing is that people are not able to see services because county governments are trying to beat the law, are trying to play around, because the law says allocate. They say, okay, we have allocated past it, but because the law did not just say spend, so they do not end up spending. But that is wrong, because I believe that the drafters of the Constitution, in their wisdom, did not just intend that this law stops at allocating. You allocate with the intention of spending. But because that is missing, so people do not get services because somebody has to advance their interest. We also see the control of budget continuously raise concerns that even during spending, absorption does not happen. Monies may be there. Recurrent will be absorbed, but development monies are not absorbed. And again, we now see at national government, and Kibaso, thank you for the good job, where he is acting the launching of ghost projects that are costing the taxpayers money. This has been allowed to happen for the longest time because nobody has spoken to it. Nobody, or rather Kenyans, were not following. So this is something Kenyans are coming to learn at this particular point. But what has happened over the years? So we see impunity reign even as regards to public finance management. And yet, when you talk about power, when you talk about the president and even the county government, the governors as well, I mean, they are in power to manage resources, including public finance. And so if this is not being put into good use, then we do not even have business continuing to have this devolved system of government, or having leaderships that at the end of the day are not inspiring hope in Kenyans. And then talk about Auditor General. So, I mean, this is an office that is being kept afloat by taxpayers' money. A lot of money goes into the auditing processes of these counties. They will then eventually give us reports in 6 months. The Constitution says this report should be tabled with the National Assembly. What do we see? We have seen reports that come out 7 months, 8 months later, when these governors have been engaged in corruption, so that at least their names, they could be sanitized and removed on, or rather their reports are not seen as those that have violated the public finance management. So we are seeing the beating of the law, but I think for me, even as these independent officers are placed here, we believe that there's really no power that has been guaranteed to them. And I was thinking in the next life, if we should ever have a constitutional moment, officers such as that of Auditor General should be given prosecutorial powers, so that if at all they find an individual culpable, then action needs to be taken. But at this point, that is not happening. We have not seen any person being prosecuted because of some of the illegalities or criminalities that have been pointed out by the offices of the Auditor General. The EACC, for example, I mean, when this government came into being, we saw the dropping of cases of high-profile individuals. Eventually, these individuals are appointed into high-level offices. But I mean, we are happy because at the end of the day, the outcome of such kind of impunity in terms of even nominating and appointing individuals of questionable integrity has come to pass, where they have not been able to perform, but rather have gone into government and mismanaged public resources, plundered and looted the public resources. We now have a number of scandals in place, and recently again with the appointment of the new cabinet secretaries, the case of that of Oparanya, for example. I mean, EACC said they do not approve him for that position because, again, he was having an ongoing case. But what happened? We saw a clash between the ODPP and the EACC. We have seen impunity again. We see Parliament already approved this individual to go in as a cabinet secretary. I mean, what is basically happening in this country? That is not what the Constitution envisaged, especially under Chapter 6 on integrity. And because even at the Constitution, we are electing people with questionable integrity into these offices, who then come appoint people again with questionable integrity, we end up seeing the manifestation of this in terms of management of our resources. So that is really an issue that really affects broadly, and the manifestation of this kind of impunity and action has gone far and wide. Look at the public services today. I mean, these are being auctioned. The education sector in this country is on the brink of collapse. The university students right now, especially those from poor backgrounds, are unable to further their education. What are we doing to our children? Those in primary school right now, teachers and parents are confused on where to take their children, on what direction their children are taking. So it's really a sad state of affair, despite having a progressive constitution, one held in globally as a progressive constitution. Not much is happening that can be able to inspire hope in many Kenyans. But we are happy that these youthful Kenyan protests have really signaled a new dawn in the country, because right now Kenyans are investing their time, Kenyans are investing their resources to gather evidence that whatever accountability is being sought is that one that is evidence-based. So nobody will refuse. For example, Kibaso would fuel his car and go down to where some of these projects, the ghost projects, have been launched and act. So there's nobody to come and say, that is a lie. There's evidence that this is happening. So I think as I even finalize and continue to celebrate the Constitution, individuals, especially those ones that are in government, that we have bestowed the responsibility at National Assembly, at the Senate, and also at the Executive, are continuously failing Kenyans, because every other thing that Kenyan has refused, and yet has the Constitution has been given, the National Assembly has been given the power to make the final decision. They have failed Kenyans continuously. Look at the Finance Bill 2023 and 2024. It only took Kenyans to exercise their power directly as guaranteed under the Constitution for us to see the thwarting of the same. When it comes to public finance again, for example, the county assemblies, with the law has given them only 3 mandates: to represent, to legislate, and to oversight. But go to counties today. Many counties have now budgets for the members of county assembly. You will see a county government, for example, having given every member of the county assembly 20 million to manage. So are they implementers? Is this not against the Constitution? Are they looting this money? And for me, these monies, I see them as a reward to them to continue campaigning even during implementation period, even during a time where they should be doing the 3 mandates. They are continuing to use the budgets at the county to be able to continue with campaigning, so that they can secure their political position in subsequent governments and tenures. So really there's work to do, but mine is to celebrate but also appreciate especially the youthful Kenyans for the good work that they are doing in this country in terms of seeking accountability. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Annette. Everybody who's joined us now so far, thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. Tonight, we are looking ahead of the 27th of August, that's next week on Tuesday, when the Constitution of Kenya will be marking 14 years. Annette Nerima, who's just spoken, is a public finance practitioner. She just set the stage and the scene for us on the conversation that we'll be having tonight. Our keynote speakers are Boni Mwangi. Boni is an economist and a certified public accountant. If you follow him, you've seen on X, he's been very, very, very active. He's taking time, a lot of time, to painstakingly go through our budgets for counties and specifying the counties that he's going to. He has said he's going to go through all 47 counties, looking at 1, 2, 3 financial years and looking at how money has been spent in those counties in terms of budgetary allocations, actual projects implemented and where else the money has been spent. And he'll be speaking to us shortly. We also have Morara Kebaso. Morara has also been very, very active on X. He's taking his time as well, going around the country, looking at projects that have been earmarked for development and they've been launched and how far they've gone so far. Some of them have been launched multiple times, and we've recently seen a response to him coming from State House on trying to, set the record straight on some of the things that he's raising. Still, the issues remain. A project was launched, a project was then cancelled, a project was relaunched. So what has happened in the intervening period? If the impact of that was meant to go to the people, if a project was initially launched in 2013 and then being relaunched 8 years later, or 5 years later, or 10 years later, what does that mean to the people who are the intended beneficiaries of that project? What is the value for money for them from the government? And that's the question that Morara has been raising. He'll be speaking to us shortly. I first want to introduce to you Betty Okero. Betty has been also in this on this matter for many years. She's a governance and women's rights practitioner. Betty, as you come in, I want to set you off with a couple of questions. Like Annette has reminded us, the Constitution basically sets various areas and says, this is how we are going to make sure that the public benefit from the Constitution and from being in this country. It sets in checks and balances. It sets in Parliament and the county assemblies and gives them the powers to oversight, and says this assembly of the representatives of the people will be oversighting the executive in everything that the executive is doing. It also brings in the independent offices, the office of the control, the office of the Auditor General, the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, sets in commissions, Commission on Gender, Commission on Equality, on Human Rights, Commission on Cohesion, Commission on Ethics and fighting corruption, the Commission on making sure that the public are getting benefits from their government, and if they don't, they go to that commission. Commission on Administrative Justice, the Ombudsman Office, there's a judiciary that makes sure that then it arbitrates, and the judiciary is meant to be the place to take interpretation of the law, or to go and say that we are getting the services that we should be getting from the government. All these offices set by the Constitution so that there is accountability for everything that the government is doing. Have those institutions delivered over the last 14 years? Betty, over to you. Betty, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me now? Sorry,
yes,
I had
yes.
Okay. So thank you so much, Eric. And I want to thank everybody who has joined us today. I think generally Kenyans are struggling to understand much better. In response to the question you have asked, I think for me, I would respond by saying that our leaders pretend not to know right from wrong. They have continued to operate like as though we are in a gray zone, not understanding the boundaries that the Constitution provides, or the principle or the moral standards that are set in therein. And so, operating in this gray zone gives them an opportunity to not have to adhere to the spirit and the letter. There's also an attitude of convenience. So they decide when they think it works for them. And I can give you an example, especially when you're talking about the 2/3 gender, where we saw the convenient attitude that was displayed, despite the meetings, the court rulings, the pretense with the Duale bill that was presented, which went and died on the floor because it lacked support, or even the frameworks that are put in place. But there are no resources to be able to ensure that those work, no resources to be able to address inequality, to strengthen justice, to address the disparities that we see. And on top of that, that if Kenyans are asking for accountability because of the shameless silence that we have witnessed from the different institutions that we're talking about, or if at all they respond, it's very feeble, or if it's not that, the demand from citizens to be able to give them the evidence, even where that evidence is looking and slapping them right in the face, it just goes to show how everybody has decided, those people in positions of responsibility and power have decided or taken a position that they are not going to do anything. But it also goes back to we as citizens who have also accepted the notion that there is only a clique who are supposed to be responsible for managing this country, for responding to issues. And I think one can be able to see that from the way the Gen Zs or the issue around the protest by citizens was dealt with. So we are reminded daily not to rock the boat. And we are reminded by their inaction, but we are also reminded by their action. So you do have sometimes, the different independent and state officers acting, but we never see them acting in the interest of citizens. I mean, how many times have we seen matters in court that are then removed for lack of evidence? You've got the Office of the Deputy Public Prosecutor coming in and saying there is nothing. You have got the investigator saying something else, or the ESCC reporting that no, we had enough. There's a complete disconnect within the institutions, and they're all not talking to each other. And that has allowed for the sort of creeping impunity that one witnesses. And when citizens come on board, because they are not going to settle with what Kenyans are now calling a crime scene, they are reminded not to do that in the most evil and horrendous actions. It is by fiat decrees that we see, chilling threats, insane intimidation. We saw people, being tortured, people being abducted. We have heard of people disappearing. And in spite of all that, there has been cricket silence from these institutions. I mean, I must commend the Kenya National Human Rights Commission for at least coming forward and speaking and doing their bit. But the other organizations have completely been silenced, and we have got a problem. We must be able to address the what we call state capture of organizations. And Kenyans need to start paying keen attention as to who are elected and appointed in some of these institutions, because it matters who you put there, because then you see the impact of the people we put there through the inaction that we're now witnessing. So as we're reflecting 14 years later, given that 14 years ago we started with jubilation and joy and felt this burden of, it didn't matter what tribe I came from, it didn't matter what my status was, it didn't matter what it was. That's what it meant in August 2010 when they promulgated this constitution. And yet 14 years later, and I want to give a big shout out to Gen Z for having the courage to confront the inequality, the disparity, and taking over the responsibility that should otherwise have been placed on this independent officers for exercising their civic responsibility. We actually saw what happened. There was silence. In fact, so many people now have been silenced because of fear and inaction. And somehow the conversation around rights, freedoms, governance, accountability, corruption, and the rule of law is now, we're being told, is the exclusive right and dominance of single groups, whether it's in parliament, whether they say that MCAs, or whether it is your Senate. They're the only ones who feel that they have, and that the threat by Kenyans to be able to demand accountability because of a failure of a watchdog institution has resulted in the staggering price that we now see. In fact, it goes to the point whereby there's a threat to the end of human life, and it's not okay. And I think for every one of us, it should give us pause that we as citizens, the Constitution says that we are sovereign and we have got power. We are then being told we cannot talk about things that affect our lives. Basic things are important in our dignity, we're now being told are not our forte. Instead, we're being told that we should shut up and let other people take charge. But I think the other issue that we have to deal with also is the socio-political context, which is, if you go everywhere, it is littered with so much bragging and a lot of utadu from our Kenyan leaders, Look at our social media, and I think I've also seen, and also I want to give a big shout out to Bonnie for having fortitude to do the work that they're doing, that you're doing to ensure that this is, because it is exhausting to just be able to write every single day and see what's going on, and yet be told that, well, whatever, because that is really what we're getting. And that it has also led to the detachment by citizens to stop trying to address what ails Kenyans. And for that reason, I think many Kenyans were so happy when we saw the young people coming out to the streets, because they said enough is enough. They went out to shout and say, we can do better. We want to do better. We must do better. They want to reclaim their country. And the robust action that was taken by these people was important. We saw a bit of action, or we saw the withdrawal of, the finance bill. We've also seen it coming back. And the question we're asking is, why is it that all that effort and all the sacrifice that made has meant nothing to Kenyans? And this is the reason why I'm talking about this bragging that they have, you just wait, you shall see. Or even if, what will you do? It is every single day that we get to be able to hear that, to see that, the lack of values, the fact that we're using, ethnic politics to be able to divide, so that even we are trying to speak out because our watchdog organizations are not doing anything, we then have fellow Kenyans, unfortunately, telling us, shut up, and then trying to create a whataboutism and saying you will all just peter off and die. When I speak to a number of Kenyans that I work with, and I meet every single day, they tell me how they're struggling to make ends meet, how they cannot even put food on the table. They're not able to meet their parental obligations. I think there's so many of us who know of people, of parents, who make a choice about who they're going to take to school. They make a choice about who is going to eat what on a day. They're either dodging their landlords because they cannot afford to pay their rent and they have defaulted. They're unable to pay electricity bills. And all this is compounded. And yet every single day, we have to deal with scandal after scandal after scandal. Huge sums of money that some of us are unable to know how to count. And it happens. And there's no action whatsoever from our elected leaders who are watchdogs, from the institutions who are being paid and taxed with the responsibility. And there are 15 independent offices. 15. And there's nothing. So you have the National Police Authority not able to rein in the police when they're misbehaving. You have the ESCC just looking and passing by, even as the audit reports are being given. You have the Commission on Administration of Justice, who never spoke, uttered, was not present at the point when young people were being arrested and being charged with false, charges on their charge sheet, never came out. You have got Teacher Service Commission, who are not uttering a word. We're being told that there are schools that are getting money and they do not even exist. The response, the lack of response, is something that we should all rebuke. We must be able to speak up and tell them, if they do the work that they're meant to do, we have to get rid of the people who are there and demand that we have the right people who are able to do this. So Kenyans now, for me, Gen Z started a conversation. They started a movement, they started an action, but they need backup. And we need to apply different strategies. We need to be able to write up and say we are done. Because we were there in July when Kenyans said they were done, and they acted collectively with one voice and one purpose. But all that was chilled into silence because of what people were experiencing. But we didn't come out as Kenyans to be able to give backup, to be able to speak out, to be able to defend, to be able to protect, to be able to go on the street and also be counted as one, or to do things that were important, because Kenyans now are the only oversight or watchdog institutions that we have. So we need to be able to back each other up. We need to be able to say that we cannot have rejected a finance bill and now we're being told it's being brought back. And the reason why it's been brought back is because we have bills, we have debts to pay. And nobody has been able to explain to Kenyans how much, when it was borrowed, what it was borrowed for, where it has worked. We are yet to recover from the staggering billions that we're losing in corruption, and now we're being told that we're going to bring it back and increase the same taxes that we were refusing. I worry that this time, when Kenya, our house Kenya, was on fire, and Kenyans built out this time, I'm not sure we'll be able to get back. But we as Kenyans need to be able to prepare, because if we do not speak out, we end up being the only ones who suffer. The others are comfortable, and I think we have seen the massive amounts of money that they are earning. I mean, this insane greed this insatiable greed to be able to amass tons and tons of money is something that continues to mind-boggle everybody. And, thank God he has been able to break it down in languages that we can all see. But apart from that, Kibas is telling us, hello, you think that the scandal is only in the reports? The scandal is actually in the physical absence of things that are being done and yet being quoted to finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Betty. And thank you for that as well. Remember, everyone, as we're talking about all these things, for example, right now, the conversation that, is alive in the country is on education and access to education for everybody, right? So we keep saying every year that the huge chunk of our budget goes towards funding education, directly over 600 billion shillings. Indirectly, there's a lot more. 30% of CDF is going into education in terms of bursaries. There's bursaries from the Ministry of Health, of Education, bursaries from the presidency. And now the conversation is all this money actually making sense if the people who need to have access to education, which is all children of the Republic of Kenya, are all struggling to get access to education in one way or the other. Is it helping us or is it not? So for us to bring in our speakers for tonight, I'm going to start with Bonnie. And Bonnie, I know you have another call that you need to pick in about 20 or so minutes. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes so that you start off. We've seen the work that you've been doing, Bonnie. You have decided to take up the issue of accountability at county level and looking at how our money is being spent at the county level. First, I want you to tell us who Bonnie is, what you do, and why you decided to do this. And then I'll ask you the next questions of what's happened. Just, it's good for us to know who is this Bonnie Mwangi who's been doing all these conversations. We know another Bonnie Mwangi.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Awesome. So thanks for the opportunity, Eric, and thanks everyone for joining this discussion, which is coming at a very important time for our country. So my name is Bonnie Mwangi, born and raised in Kenya. Although I spent a lot of my life in the US and Canada, I left Kenya as a teenager and came to the US, trained as an economist, studied law, and I work as an economist. And so the reason why I started looking at some of these things is as an economist, look at where our country is right now, look at our potential, and I see a gap. And so I started looking at how we are spending money in Kenya to see if I can identify what seems to be the issue. So let me just start off with making a few remarks and then I can take your questions, Eric. So the first thing I want to mention is that as a country, today we're sitting on almost 11 trillion shillings in debt. So 11 trillion. Much of this debt was accumulated for the last 10 years. So if you think about our country, since independence to about 2013, we never had debt. I'm talking about national debt that was more than 2 trillion. So think about all the development that we saw during the Kibaki years. All of that stuff never had more than 2 trillion in debt. So we got our new system of government, and since 2014 to today, we've accumulated 9 trillion additional. So we're sitting on almost 11 trillion worth of debt. And because of this debt buildup, today our country is having to spend 60% of every shilling that comes in through taxation just to pay interest. Not a principal, just interest. So just think about what that means, right? Before we spend money on national security, before we spend money on education, before we say how much we spend on healthcare, 60% goes out the window to pay interest. So just think about the missed opportunities as a country in terms of our ability to improve our lives, in terms of our ability to invest in infrastructure, in the future of our children, right? that's the natural consequence of fiscal discipline. And if you look at the last 10 years, since we've got this new system of government, we are running budget deficits to the tune of 1 trillion every year, 1 trillion shillings every year. And so, just think about where we are as a country right now, as much as we are unhappy with our situation. If we don't change direction, just think of where we are right now. We're sitting almost 11 trillion in debt. Just look forward 10 years from now, right? We keep adding a trillion in debt, you're going to wake up with 22, 23 trillion shillings in debt in the near future. I don't think any of us wants to be in that kind of a situation. And that's why we need to have this discussion today. The next point to make sure that I point out is that as a country, we wanted devolution because we wanted to bring accountability local regions. We wanted to bring development. We wanted to bring services and accountability locally. So we are spending 400 billion annually, sending that money to the county. Again, I point out that because of our fiscal discipline, 100% of that money that we're sending to the counties is actually money that we are borrowing. We don't have it, right? We issue them a credit card. And so if we're going to do that, particularly if you're going to spend money that we don't have, I think it behooves us as a people to ask whether we are achieving the objectives of devolution. Are we making progress, right? And then as someone who spent a lot of time looking at some of these matters the last year or two, I can tell you today that we are not doing what we should be doing. We are not improving lives. We are not serving the people. We are not solving problems. We are not bringing services to our communities. And so I think the questions that I will challenge all of us to ask ourselves are the following. One, is our structure of government necessary and sustainable? Do we need it? And can we sustain it? And I think the answer to me is an emphatic no, and here's why. I just told you how much money we have today in debt, right? We are spending 60% of every shilling that comes in through taxation just to pay interest. We are sitting on 11 trillion worth of debt. We just can't afford it. Even if the structure was serving us, we can't afford it. So we have to make changes today. Second thing is, only in Kenya do we feel the need to have this many people representing us, right? I live in Texas, many of you know that. And so, but I ask you to allow me to use Texas as an example, right? Texas as an economy, or has an economy that's 21 times bigger than Kenya, right? 2.3 trillion USD is the economy of Texas. Our economy in Kenya is about 110 billion. In fact, the city that I live in, Dallas, one city has an economy that's 1.5 times bigger than Kenya. So just think about that. A city like Dallas has an economy that's 1.5 times the size of the Kenyan economy. But if you look at representation in parliament, it's a very different picture. With that size of an economy, Texas has about 180 people in parliament, 30 in the Senate, about 150 in the House. So that's 180. To look at us in Kenya, we have 290 MPs. We've got 47 senators. We've got 47 women reps. We've got governors, and then we have 1,450 MCAs. Why do we feel like that's necessary? What is the point of it? And so I believe that we don't need that many people representing us. We cannot afford it. We need to make changes. Second point I want to point out is the following. Our politicians in our system are eating up the vast majority of resources. And so this is what I mean. If you look at compensation for politicians globally, our Kenyan politicians are the second highest paid in the world. Second highest. When you consider the size of our GDP, that's higher than the US, higher than the Netherlands, higher than Canada, higher than the UK, Switzerland, Germany, and on and on and on. Why are we doing this? What is the justification? Why do we need to pay someone more money than a senator makes in the US? Right? It makes no sense. We are a country that cannot afford this kind of thing. Next point I want to point out is this. If the idea of devolution is to bring accountability and services to the people locally, and if the idea is to bring development, right? If I take a county like Migori and say they have a budget of 9 billion, okay, well and good. But when the money gets to the ground, what we are finding out is that the county assembly on its own is probably going to take 1 billion of that money. That's the budget for the county assembly. Then the executive office, the governor, they're going to take 1.5 or 2 billion. So now you've got 30% of the budget is gone. Just those two line items, right? Then you find out that the rest of the money, the rest of the amount that's left, 50% of it is going to salaries, and then 25 on ridiculous amount of allowances. I've never seen such kind of allowances, responsibility allowance, tuition allowance, risk allowance. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We cannot afford it. And so when you really dig down and say, okay, we sent 9 billion to Migori, how much actually ended up serving someone? How much was actually used to serve someone? Very little. Very little. I'll give you an example. A county like Migori, they have a budget of 9 billion every year. Can you believe that that county spent 1 billion in 1 year on domestic travel? How is that possible? In a small country like Migori, how do you spend 1 billion on domestic travel? And then when you look at that county's ability to sell, is what we call own service revenue, right? The idea of sending this money to these counties is that you're trying to equip them with what they need to put themselves in a position to attract investment, to be able to attract companies coming there, to be able to attract, skilled labor, for example. When you look at how they're spending that money, none of those objectives are being met. We are spending money on things like, for example, I was looking at some of you guys may have seen what my post yesterday about the county of Siaya, right? They spend more money on the governor's office and the deputy governor's office. They spend more money on the county than they spend on 90% of the departments, on things like education, things like healthcare, things like childhood services. They spend more money on themselves than they spend on those important services. And then they spend 10% of the budget on domestic travel, right? It's ridiculous. We can't do it, and I'm not sure what we can do with that. Then when you look at the balance, right? The balance money that's not eaten up by salaries. It's just disheartening to see what's going on. You have a country like Seattle that have a 34% poverty rate, right? Per capita income of 131,000. And when you look at how they're spending the money, I know the law says that they need to spend 30% on development, and so we have to think about what actually that means. Well, when we say 30%, what do we mean actually? It's not just setting aside the budget of 30%, but then when you look at how they spend the money, it's not actually development, right? Building latrines is not development. Digging boreholes is not development. Spending, I'll give you an example, something that really shocked me yesterday. Looking at the county of Siaya, their biggest expenditures in terms of development included, the biggest one was 160 million that was spent on fencing ward offices. That's not development. You're spending money to fence politicians' homes or offices. That's not development. They spent 150 million to build apparently halls to meet people. That's development. Okay, and then they spent 117 million for boreholes. We are wasting everybody's time. We're wasting important resources. We just can't afford to continue like this. And so we're having this discussion at a very important time in our country. We need to hold our politicians accountable. We need to demand better. And then for us as citizens, we need to really get involved. The time for passive citizenship is over. We just can continue hoping for the best. We have to get involved, and we have to make sure that we think about the people that we put in office. 90% of our problems, to me, can be solved by voting in the right people. Because if you put in a parliament that has people that don't know what it means to actually be a member of parliament in a constitutional democracy, they're not going to help. Our country takes 9 trillion in debt in 10 years without having shown any ability to service that debt. I'm an economist. I've spent a lot of time with companies globally, things like financial arrangements. If you walk into my door and you tell me that you're looking to borrow $1 billion, I'm going to say, okay, I need to see your balance sheet. I need to see that you have the ability to take on this debt. I need to see that you'll be able to service the debt. How is it that our parliament does not require that of the executive branch, right? How do you raise national debt by 450% when our economy, which is a proxy for our ability to service debt, only improves by 130%. You're going to have a problem. So we need to think about the people that we send to parliament. We need to get involved, and we need to demand better. And so for that, I will, step back and take any question that you may have.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. There are a couple of comments that have come in, and then I'll ask you a question. I see. Did you ask about the promise on reducing the advisors and also public services public officers who are 60 years? Information is an enabler. That's what Victor is saying. Data is power. Thanks to power of technology and Kibaki, Kenyans have access to both as information and power. Discuss on how this aspect can be utilized, just as we skipped landlines and straight to mobile and to M-Pesa. Jacoraro says the former Treasury CS seems to understand the problem once he left office, similar to many failed politicians. How can the Kenyan Constitution compel these people or such people to be charged for negligence? It's a good question, a good way of putting it, and a good issue being raised. I'm going to come to you shortly, Bonnie. And the question that I want to ask you is, you raise these issues, and they're very, very good issues. And the way you actually break it down in such a way that people can understand, people can see. When you say, for example, Migori has spent $1 billion shillings on domestic travel, and then looking and comparing with how much money has actually gone to actual service delivery for the people, how much money has gone to hospitals that are supposed to be serving the people, or to ECDs, or to agriculture that goes directly to the people. You see, and you clearly put it out there that there's no comparison, that money is actually going to the wrong areas. What would you like to see citizens do when they consume the information that you give out to us, and others would like to participate in such? Because we're talking about raising accountability by the people. What would you like the people to do?
So I think the most important things that citizens can do is to actually make sure that they keep politicians accountable. Every bit of information that I use in doing this analysis is public information. There's nothing that I get from a whistleblower. Go to the Office of Auditor General, look up your county, look at how, look at the budgets, right? So first of all, go to your county's website, look at the budget and look at how they're spending the money. Our law basically requires these people to tell us how they're going to spend the money, and you can see enough detail to be able to see, for example, how much they're actually spending on themselves versus how much they're actually spending on services. But you can see that. They hope you're not going to look at that, but that information is available there. Second thing is go to the Office of Auditor General, read these reports because they're issued and they're on the website, and make sure that you are communicating with the politicians and letting them know that you know what they're doing, right? Because politicians, the last thing that they want is to lose elections. They don't want to be kicked out. So the moment they see that the average citizen is thinking about how the money is being spent, the behavior is going to change. Most importantly, I think our biggest weapon that we have to solve this problem is to make sure that we vote for the right people. Again, I don't think we have an issue of having no laws in our books. We have a lot of laws, right? So it's not like, we need to come up and invest, come up with new laws. They are there. But because we have things in office, and how can you explain, for example, a situation where, in Turkana, for example, massive loading, billions of money spent and lost, right? Under the previous Governor Nanok. That individual today is working in State House. You and I are taking a salary. How is it possible that we can have that kind of a situation, right? We just saw recently the president announcing a cabinet made up of people like Oparanya, who his own EACC told him, do not touch this individual with a 10-foot pole. And the president still feels like he has enough impunity to be able to do something like that. So we need to demand better of ourselves, and we need to demand better of our citizens. And hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Bonnie. And yes, that's a good point to actually raise, that as we talk about our Katiba, as we look at our Katiba that is now a proper teenager, as Annette reminded us, 14 years of the Constitution, we need to be more active, we need to demand better, we need to be more aware of our power as citizens and the agency that citizens have. Bodi, thank you. We'll come back to you shortly. I want to bring in Morara Kibaso. Morara is another person who's also been very, very active on these matters, has taken it upon himself to dedicate his time, his energy, his money to go around the country and just look at projects that are on record as being implemented. They were launched, they are now going on. So what's happening to those particular projects? How are they being implemented? Morara Kibaso, karibu sana. Thank you for speaking to us tonight. The number of projects that you have raised in this country, if I was to ask you to just summarize what you in not one sentence, make it a paragraph. If you were to summarize in a paragraph of our development projects.
Well, in a paragraph that Kenya is a country, we are living in planned poverty, and these people do not advance any program or project unless they are benefiting. I've been touring the whole country, trying to find those dead projects where money has been spent, but there is nothing to show for it. And I've found so many. I'm even trying to find a way of how to visit all of them because there are excessively many. Kenya is full of tombstones and abandoned graves of projects where money has been spent and there's nothing to show for it. That is despite the fact that our public funds has also been pilfered and put into personal accounts to earn interest and in money market funds. My findings are shocking. And in my episode of the Vampire Diaries tomorrow, I want is going to shock you. Should I continue, Eric?
Morara, continue. Go on.
Yeah. So now, fellow Kenyans, a time has come when we must take charge of our affairs. A time has come when we must realize that our country is being auctioned, and if we don't find a way to save it, we are going to lose it forever. We are being led by a government which I can, in the best words possible, I would describe it as a criminal enterprise of criminals well organized and creating a theater and drama for us in a way that may seem like there's something they are doing, when in actual sense there is absolutely nothing they are doing. I'll mention for you some of the projects that I've been able to visit and what I found out there. And I'll tell you about how much I'm yet to visit. For example, my journey began at the Devki Kinani Road, which is in Machakos. This road is 25 kilometers. It's supposed to join up to Joska. It was allocated 1.78 billion. So far, 456 million been certified for payment. There is nothing, absolutely nothing to show for it. There's just dust and a few culverts, more dust. And the governor of that county lives on that road. I went to Olkejuado University, which was launched by William Ruto on the 3rd of September 2020, allocated 600 million by the county government of Kajiado. Nothing but an abandoned stone. Even the name William Ruto has been stolen. I went to Ngong Sports Complex, which was allocated 198 million. The contractor has already been paid 50 million. Nothing but bushes. I interviewed some of the youth from a local club that is trying to train Ngong, and they've been trying to slash the bushes there, but it's been a very difficult job. I went to the Tula Sholinke Road, which was allocated money by the Kenya Roads Board under the road maintenance levy. Remember, Kipchumba Murkomen said that they collected over 96 billion from the road maintenance levy. That road was allocated money. It is so bad that the residents of that area have been contributing money from their own pocket to try and find ways of making the road for themselves. So far, in their WhatsApp group, they've contributed 371,000, and they're still contributing to try and maintain their own road. Yet they pay taxes. Yet every good that they buy has VAT. Every liter of fuel they buy has road maintenance levy. I went to Muranga, Ikumbi, Karinga, Kagundu Road, launched in July 2023 by President William Ruto. It was even launched twice because CS Mashari had launched it back in 2019. Despite of both launches, nothing, absolutely nothing, in a highly agriculturally productive area. In this case, in fact, it's nothing. Like, I cannot even tell you of a culvert. There is ata hakuna maram. Yani, it is the... I went to where the president says in Ruiru, employing 5,000 youth on our digital economy. I found that first, the company that is there employs no more than 1,000 youth, and it's a private company called CCI, which is underpaying our youth, not giving them leave. They work under very toxic working conditions. Show to us as though it's a government project, as if it's a government initiative. I think for the use of our taxes. You see, you cannot come to Morara's house. You launch my house, which are built with money. Then you say, tumejengea vijana. Sasa tuko na mpango ingine. Tumeweka another 15 billion ya hawa mama mboga hawa. Na hawa beba. Sasa hawa wote wanaweza kukopa deni ya interest bila interest ili kujiendeleza. Sijui kama tunaelewana. Mimi nitazungumza na wewe mjumbe wenu. Hapa. Tutajenga TTI hapa. Kutakuwa na machines hapo ya hawa vijana kujifunza. Mukisikia mambo ya TTI za educational centers, just go to Pokot South. That is in the Rift Valley where William Ruto comes from. A technical vocational center has been built using public resources and it collapsed. It fell flat on its face. Yani nyumba, gorofa, imeanguka chini, imelala kwa nyasi. And public funds have been spent millions. I went to Captain Deni, Wanjohi, Kwamatu, Geta, Kahuruko, Ndunyunje. Papalo President Officer.
You're slightly off mic. Yeah, now I think it's better now. Go ahead.
Okay. I went to Captain Demi, Wanjohi, Kwamatu, Kahuruko, Ndunyunjeru Road, which was launched by Papalo President Officer Day. He himself launched it on the 26th of November 2018. Hit again on 6th April 2023. Nothing, and absolutely nothing to show for it. I went to Eldoret Airstrip, where politicians have planted maize and wheat on an airport. And they are using the tractor of Kenya prisons. The impunity, the audacity. I went to Kamarini Stadium, the one which said in another 6 months, this stadium in Kamarini, which is historical, will be complete. Nothing to show for it. Nothing to show for public funds wasted. His promises amount to nothing. On the issue of stadiums, I still went to Water Stadium. Water Stadium spent nothing. In Water Stadium, the contractor has already been paid 162 million Kenya shillings. 162 million. And what we have is a concrete track, some grass, and a perimeter wall. Just next to that stadium, as if it was not enough, as if they didn't get the message that they are a failure, they have now cleared the bushes and fence. They want to build affordable housing. Before I even speak of affordable housing, how affordable is the affordable housing? Affordable to who? These Kenyans are suffering. They have no jobs. Their businesses are failing. Then you are telling them that you've built for them affordable houses. A bed sitter in Kirinyaga housing program cost 1.7 million. How many Kenyans can afford a bed sitter 1.7? How many will be willing to buy it in Kirinyaga? It's a dead white elephant project just meant to loot public funds. You imagine, you take money from the people, you build them houses, then you sell to the people whom you took money from. So there, in Water Stadium, just next to where he wants to build housing program, you can watch my videos on X. He has another housing program that was built by Uhuru when he was the deputy president. The roof is caving in, the houses are being, they are collapsing, the walls are cracked. 20 flats. When I talk about a flat, I mean a flat. I mean a building kutoka chini paka juu yenye kuna several units. 20 flats. All of them damaged. Now we want to build new ones. Where are our priorities? You might think that our politicians are stupid, but are they? They are not. They are professors. Some of them have done PhD. Some of them have even gone to the best schools in the world. This Henry Rotich was our cabinet secretary for treasury. That guy studied in Harvard. Most people, these people are very well learned. They know what they are doing. They are doing it for themselves. They are stealing without conscience. Unajua hata kama unatuibia, tuibie kidogo tufanyie kazi. But absolutely nothing, zero. I went to another project called Swake Dam. Swake Dam is in Makueni. In this Swake Dam, the shock of my life is that the contractor was paid 236 million extra. Not part of his bill of quantities, not part of the contract, not part of what he was supposed to pay. Hiyo ameongezewa. Hiyo ni kama ya ameongezwa tu 236 million. Ati hiyo ni interest for late payment. Spending bills. Spending bills is of public funds. It is deliberate. It is a problem created by politicians who occupy public office to steal Kenyans' money. Even on Nuno Modegashe Road, which is in Garissa, the contractor has been paid. Hiyo yani, hiyo tumekuongeza tu hiyo. Shika hiyo. You Ministry of 1.4 million spent on an interview to hire an accountant, and they still never found an accountant out of that interview. Now, why should we even be spending money to hire an accountant yet we have a public service commission? We have a boardroom in the ministry funded by public resources. We have HR, deputy HR practitioners in the ministry, hired and paid by public resources, and we're still paying 1.4 million to look. Go to the e-citizen platform. You read the Auditor General's report for the financial year 2020. 10 billion paid citizen platform can neither be confirmed nor denied. The government cannot say for sure whether it had the money or not. They are also shocked that it is missing. They are also shocked that the figures are different. You go to Ministry of Environment. Ministry of Environment is unable to explain how it spent 140 million shillings in one day to plant trees. You know, I'll be taking this. I show you that there were no trees actually. Some of the trees were not even watered, they died. But 140 million a day? You go to Treasury shillings, withdrawn from Treasury to allegedly to buy shares for Africa Trade and Development Bank and shares for Africa Export-Import Bank, Exim Bank, and to buy shares Jamhuri Holdings Limited, ya Telcom. 12.5 billion was withdrawn from Treasury the way you withdraw money from ESA. And it's lost. Nobody can account for it. Ati hata hizo banks zenye tulikuwa tunanunua shares kwao ati hawashiki simu. Imagine the Auditor General saying in the Auditor General's report ati they could not be traced, and my attempts to reach them were unanswered or they were uncooperative. You steal from us and you are uncooperative. Angalia, we paid an extra last year. We paid an extra 3.1 billion for fuel ati because ship ilichelewa kwa dock. Ati there was a ship that brought oil, ikachelewa kuoffload pale Mombasa. We paid what we call demurrage charges ya hiyo ship kuchelewa ya 3.1 billion. You know, for you to get to a billion, Kenyans, I don't know whether they understand what a billion is. Me, I've never seen a billion in my life. A billion is 1,000 millions. So when you talk about 3.1 billion, we are talking about 3,100 millions. It's money that you cannot keep in your bedroom unless you denominate it in dollars. You go to London, Kenyans in London, please tell me, our lease for the embassy and chancery building in London expired in 2021. We, the Kenyan people, loving you Kenyans in London, we didn't want you to suffer. We disbursed 1.6 billion in the financial year of 2021-2022 and 2022-2023, 1.6 billion in total for you to buy that building and own it so that it can belong to the Republic of Kenya. We are still paying 60 million shillings per year on the rent we purportedly bought. You go to Pakistan, the capital city Islamabad, we have a high commissioner's residence that we've already paid the contractor more than 400 million for that thing. Today, I was talking to the MP for Kisumu, Shakil Shabir. He told me he went to Islamabad. He was there. The only thing that is there is a wall. New Kuta. You have 400 million yet. My friends, it is time for you to realize that we are living in a crime scene. We are living in a setup. There is no intention for anybody in this executive to do anything in governance. Everybody is thinking about stealing. The one who has not stolen feels left out. If we don't reset the button on Kenya, if we don't flush it out, if we don't drain the swamp, if we do not close this crime scene for investigations and renovations, bwana, msifanye niwe naongea hii kitu kila siku. I will kasirika and go to State House myself. I will go to demonstrate alone because I'm tired and annoyed. But am I about to stop? Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm not about to stop. Today I was at KICC to attend an event called Okoa Uchumi, which is organized by the civil society. I'm supposed to be a speaker at that event. Then when I'm getting out of the washroom, I meet the spokesman of the government. Then they greet each other, nini, tells me, Weba, mimi nahitaji namba yako tutaongea. Now, namba si kitu ya kunyima mtu, si dem, si atiambia. Wakati nampea namba, cameraman wake ananipiga picha, so that you just to say, tushalipa morara. They will use bloggers to fight back. They will use bloggers to discredit you. They will go look for your ex-girlfriend and what she can say about you. They will do everything. Corruption is evil. Evil must fight back. But me, I know, whenever you are dining with the devil in the dark, use a long fork. And I'm using a very long fork, and I'm not about to stop my visit for civic education. In fact, that is why I've cut down on my television interviews, because it's taking away the time that I would have used to be on the ground. From tomorrow, I'm resuming the Vampire Diaries Season 2. I'm bringing you a project by the government that is dead and buried and forgotten, and public resources is lost. Kesho, you stay awake to see it. The purpose of my videos is to provoke you. Yes, the purpose of my videos is to incite you. not to incite you to violence, but to incite you to take charge of civic matters. You are not too small to do something. Even if you have 10 followers, impact the 10. Get this message to your parents, get it to your friends, get it to your village mates, tell them how corruption directly affects them. Do the little that you can in the space that you occupy, and together it will be a lot. You don't do as much as Eric Latif is doing. You may not be able to do as much as Boni Mwangi is doing. You may not be as able to do as much as Morara is doing. Some things are gifts and talents. But there is something you can do. And I want to tell the people in our country who are upper middle class and the rich, don't abandon the fight for change. The rich and the upper middle class in our country, mjue that you bear a very big burden because you are able. Wacha Gen Z wenye hawana hata pesa ya kujilipia cash bail, wao peke yao ndio wanahangaika huko kwa street kujaribu kuchallenge government. Kijana hata akishikwa apeleke kotini ambiwe cash bail 50,000 they can't afford. Akiambiwa cash bail 20,000 they can't afford. The parents at home have to sell a cow. These people are rich in our country who are the upper middle class. Do something. You as a lawyer, you as an engineer, you as an artist. Umeng'ang'ana umepata kitu, usiwachilia watu. Do what you can. If you can spare 1,000 bob, spare it. If you can spare 10 minutes, spare it. Invest time, invest money, invest your emotions. Get this thing done. We are out of time. The clock is ticking. Very short time to do this. And if, by luck, this enterprise of criminals who call themselves a government get to 2027, my friend, if we vote them in, we will deserve everything they will do to us. If we vote back these criminals and idiots, we will deserve every single thing they will do to us. We need an electorate that is awake and aware. That is why we must get this message to villages. I was very happy when Kameme FM highlighted my story, because I know the people that listen to Kameme. Najua kwamba mama mwenye ako huko ushago huko Kiriaine, mwenye ako kwa shamba, ameweka redio pale kwa kona, anaendelea kulima shamba. That is the person we are reaching, so that we remove ignorance from our nation. Once we flush out ignorance, there will be no place for these evil people who have taken hostage of our country to hide. That is all I have to say.
Bonala, thank you. Thank you very much. Very well said. And, the point of the conversation that we're having tonight is, as we look into 14 years of the Constitution of Kenya, 2010, as it's known, let's remember that it places the supremacy of this Constitution in our hands as a people, as the citizens of the Republic. We are the sovereign. Then we have to stop operating as if we are the weaker side and beneficiaries of the Constitution, but that we own the Constitution. And that's what the preamble of the Constitution says, that we give unto ourselves and our future generations this Constitution. So we have a big role in ensuring that this Constitution is implemented as we wrote it and as we passed it 14 years ago. Thank you very much, Morara. Morara has been our speaker. Morara is one of our speakers tonight for this conversation, which I'm hosting to say, as we get into 14 years, we are seeing a lot of awareness, more awareness and more civic engagement by the citizens, the ordinary citizens. This has previously been left to civil society actors who have been raising issues, and they're easily pushed aside by being told you're funded. Even now, those that have been active in recent protests have started being dismissed one after the other, that they were funded, they were raising funds, they ate money, they millions of shillings, they misappropriated that money, they have no way of explaining how they spent that money. They're being dismissed and being broken down one by one that way. But what role do we have as citizens in ensuring that we get services from our government, that we implement our own constitution as we give unto ourselves? I now want to open the phone or the conversation, buddy. I would like to contribute. You can request to be a speaker. I'm just going to give every speaker a maximum of 2 minutes to speak, so we can take as many as possible. Let's keep it to the role of citizens in pushing for accountability, in pushing for the realization of the ideals of this constitution. And let's hear from you. The first person I want to give the mic to is Josephine. Josephine Nanga, go ahead. 2 minutes, please. Josephine, I can't hear you. I can see you've unmuted your mic, but can anyone hear Josephine?
No, I can hear Josephine.
Okay. So Josephine, we'll come back to you. Let's hear from Abdi. Abdi, over to you.
Thank you, Eric. You can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for hosting the speech again. I appreciate the presentation, though I find the stories from the speaker quite depressing, what we are going through. It's clear we have a long way to go before we can say we are truly free. We are not yet Uhuru. So as we commemorate these 14 years since the new 2010 constitution, we should have been a moment of pride. But instead, it has become one of the deep reflection and concerns and sorrow. The promise of our Katiba was to safeguard our rights, ensure accountability, build a society that has been compromised by, and build a just society. But what we have seen is a society compromised by those who have mutilated and weaponized this document to serve their interests rather than the people. People with questionable credentials are leading us in high office in leadership, surrounded by an elite that benefit from the status quo and I would say patronism. How people remain the losers. They are back to default setting. You know, Eric, winning election was just the beginning. The real test is about governance. Leading a nation involves navigating complex issues, balancing diverse interests, implementing meaningful policies which go beyond political strategy and requires genuine problem solving and visionary leadership. It's not about forming a coalition or a broad-based government. The solution to Kenyan problem is political. The economic problems is not political. I would say the 2010 constitution was designed as a beacon of hope, a social contract between the government and the people, enshrining our rights and responsibilities. It was meant to guarantee the rule of law and protect human rights, ensure transparency, accountability. Instead, we witnessed deliberate erosion of these principles. The judiciary once has been a beacon of justice has often fallen short, appearing inept or unwilling to stand to those who undermine the rule of law. You know, corruption and impunity have taken root with those in power, acting above the law, you know, disregarding court orders, operating with blunt disregard for the principles of justice. It has become in many ways a banana republic where the rule of law is disregarded, those entrusted upholding instead trample on it. The constitution, which was meant to be our protector, is now being twisted and manipulated against us as a tool used to oppress, silence, and control any dissent. Eric, we have seen the rising incident of police brutality, enforced disappearance, abductions, the persistent disregard for court orders. The very institution meant to protect us are being used to instill fear and suppress dissent. I think we need the failure of its independence and enforced accountability has only been those who seek to undermine our democracy and rule of law. I believe this is not what the framers of Constitution envisioned, and it is certainly not what Kenyans wanted. I think we are at a critical juncture where complacency is not an option. We must confront the reality of these abuses of power, demand an independent, courageous judiciary, insist on restoration of integrity in our institution, fight for truly democratic and just Kenya for everyone. I also think we must be vigilant, united, pushing back against those who seek to undermine our constitution. The accountability bar, I think, has been raised, but we must ensure it is met. I think the constitution is not just a legal document. It's a living, breathing contract that requires our active defense and commitment. It is the cornerstone of our democracy and a shield against the tyrant. So I think as we reflect on these 14 years, I think let's recommit ourselves to the spirit of Katiba and to the relentless pursuit of justice, equality, and accountability for all Kenyans, as Mora and the rest are doing. I think Mora and Boni are doing an excellent job to do that. And I think we should also be part of this civic education. And I would say the Constitution still remains a beacon of hope, only if we defend it with the vigilance, courage, and unity it deserves. We cannot afford it destroyed by those who swore to protect it. So, and thank you to the Speaker, Mora and Bondi, and hopefully Mondi will reconcile. Thank you, Eric.
Asante. Thank you very much, Abdi. It's Morara, Abdi. It's not Mora. But thank you. Thank you for that contribution. Let's try you.
Thank you for the correction.
Let's try Josephine again. Let's hear if we'll be able to get you this time. Josephine, you have the mic. Okay, so there's a problem with your connection or with your gadget, Josephine. We still can't get you. Keegan, you have the mic.
Thank you so much, Eric Latif, for this great space that you have given us today. I believe it touches on so many things. Sorry, I joined late because I was also not aware that it was going to be there, and I'm also traveling, so I just had to stop just to maybe give my input. So mine would probably be less than 2 minutes, as you have given us. Now, when we talk about accountability, those are some of the things that were brought up by the recent demonstrations by the Gen Z. But then we also had occasions whereby, people who believe for a good cause that the Gen Z originally stood for, and I supported, actually went ahead and, they started collecting money. Now, when we talk about accountability, Eric, we must ask ourselves why other people are not able to account for the monies that they themselves collected in order to cause for change. Now, when I talk about change, Eric, I talk about change that does not include anarchy. I talk about a constitution of 2010 that we said we shall review after 10 years. So when we cause anarchy to bring change, Eric, we go totally against what the spirit of the whole Gen Z was about, because I believe that is why most of us nowadays are on spaces, though some of us utilized this before it became popular. Now, as for my good friend Morara, I will call you a good friend because I have no enemies. I am at peace with everyone, even those that don't have the same ideals as me. You have talked about provoking. It is good, what you're doing is right, but I also believe that there are powers that are pushing you towards that direction. These powers may not necessarily be, committed to the change that we need as a country. Now, we had Gen Z generals. Yeah, I want to refer to them as Gen Z generals. The Gen Z generals, we know them. And we know that they had their few minutes of fame. So others will also have theirs before it is done. So my good brother, Morara, I see you're a lawyer. I'm only getting to know more about you now. Please remember, before you, there were many. After you, I do not know how many will be left. But please, let us do things in a structured manner, in a way that also brings Kenyans together. Yes, civil education is good, but please, let us do it in a better manner.
Again, what better manner would you propose?
You see, I see the way that they try to do things is, first of all, when there was public participation, Eric, I expected that the same people that wanted to shoot down the finance bill would actually be part and parcel of those talks. Why do I say this? Every one of us, Eric, even on your shows, you would highlight these things. Even on social media, you would these things. How is it that they, the Gen Z, never came as a group to participate in this? So now the better way is this. You cannot be leaderless. You cannot be formless, driveless, and whateverless. Okay? Sit down with the leaders of the day, because those are the ones who are chosen and anointed by God. And remember what the Bible says. If you go against those that he has chosen, then there shall be repercussions.
I want to say something. Oh yeah, I want to give you Morara an opportunity here to write a reply, because Keegan says maybe you are acting under the guidance of some other powers.
I'm Keegan that I'm acting on my own behalf, and yes, I'm supported by Kenyans. Kenyans that support me. Not all of them are sure about their character. There are people that support me who they themselves have their own issues or their own questions, their own personal patterns. So in Apple's mind, you don't get to choose who I don't choose my supporters. I'll be supported even by criminals. For me, the bigger picture is, where are we headed? Now, you say we need to have structured engagement, and I am telling you that it's not structured engagement can have a thief that has stolen your money. The only thing they can do is kukupanga, kukucheza, na kukupigisha vipindi. There is no other engagement you're going to have with them. They don't come to the engagement with clean hands. They come to the engagement to your movement, or to try and bring you down for trying to question them on stolen from you. There's no conversation you can have with them, because what will this conversation look like? Will we be telling these corrupt politicians to return our money that has been stolen? Do you think that is a kind of a conversation we can have, that sasa tumeamua tuketi chini tuongee, hii pesa mmetuibia sini mingi, tuna request kama mnaweza rudisha kidogo? That's nonsense. It cannot actually be believable. The other thing is, you talk about moments of fame. Well, I don't think fame is important. I believe that everybody, famous or not famous, should do the little that they can do, but you should not be jealous if somebody else is famous. Remember, this thing comes, and it does not come. Sometimes it comes to people that don't even want it. Some of us, we didn't even wish to be famous, because now I'm living a life that I didn't want to live. I cannot go to a hotel and have tea. I cannot walk on a corridor without pictures of me being taken. So I'm not really happy about the fame, but I'm glad that I now have a bigger platform and a bigger following to continue championing for issues of better governance and an end to corruption. So
thank you.
Please do not be cheated to believe that everybody does something for fame. Some of us actually do these things because we care. And it's not that before we started doing these things, we had nothing to do. We were actually very busy with our lives and had things to do. So the last thing I want to tell you is, stop weaponizing religion. That bullshit of telling us that people have been chosen by God is utter nonsense, and it belongs in the dustbin. Because the only way Kenya was colonized is because people came here with a Bible telling us that they've brought us the word of God. That is the same weaponization of religion which people are using when actually churches are laundering money for politicians. You pay a church owning a helicopter, a church owns a bit out on behalf of a politician. God did not choose for us thieves. We are the ones who elected these thieves. We are the ones suffering the consequences of these things, and we are trying to find a way getting rid of these pieces of shit that have made a shithole out of our.
Enough, Morara. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Morara. I have heard you. Eric, also thank you. I may need to go to the listeners now, because I will not be able to take part in any further conversation, because as I said, I was traveling. And
Asante.
I believe Morara will have another chance to have a conversation. Eric, thank you so much, and keep up the great work.
Asante. Thank you, Keegan, and thank you for joining the conversation. Yes, we'll take all. I mean, we are talking about our constitution says let's engage, and so it's important for all of us to engage respectfully, and engage on all matters. The next person I want to give the mic to is Anthony Murady. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Latif. Thank you, Morara, for the wonderful work you're doing. Thank you very much for this piece. Now, I will straight to my talking point. Number one, it's time for accountability. And the fact that people in government are not asking themselves the very pertinent question. If our leadership is so good, what has made Kenyans so woke about governance right now? If you want to know you're doing a bad job, it's when people start realizing how bad your job is until it becomes a national conversation. Now, the fact that instead of this government reacting to what Morara is doing and ask Morara, okay, this is what Morara is saying. Is it true? Yes. Can you call these people to account? What are they doing? They want to sit down and defend a totally absurd and stupid defense of defending the indefensible. There are things as a government we should not defend. Okay, those are just things. Like when I hear Kigen here trying to compare, I don't know, the president to he came from God. No, God did not vote. We voted for him, and that's why we are holding him accountable. And to refer to the same Bible, when Saul fell out of favor with God, he appointed people like Morara. And the same Saul treated Morara the same way people want to dismiss Morara. My next answer, who has given Morara this job? It is we, the Kenyans, who have appointed him. We have appointed him and given him that duty to go and tell us this is not working, that is, and we support him for that. Him and other millions of Kenyans are having a conversation today. And if work was so good, this conversation will not be happening. Lastly, Mr. Eti, Kenyans have organized themselves, and I'll say it here today to all the 1,000 listeners here. Some of us in our spaces, I call Hussein Tibe every day on X. Kenyans have organized themselves on Telegram. We have a group that is over 1,000 members strong, structured in a very organized way, from people in diaspora to fundraising to organizing at people who are looking at how can we reconstitute this constitution, what clauses do we need to look at. We have lawyers on that panel, doctors, engineers, everything. That is how bad governance makes people. It makes people come together, identify their strengths, and start looking for a way to save themselves. We have a WhatsApp group that is big, and we are still trying to organize for better governance. And let me tell this government one thing. 2027, that battle will be fought only on WhatsApp, on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on the ground. That is what they are not seeing. And it will hit them in a way they have never been hit before. Because let me tell you, Eric, the only space they can is on this one. Thank you, Lati.
Thank you, Anthony. Next speaker, Mariam, you have the mic. Mariam.
Yes, thanks a lot, Eric. I hope you're doing well. I do have a quick question. Yeah, thanks. I do have a quick question for Morara. It was very interesting to hear him run through the counties and some of the ghost projects that are being done and what is being quantified as development. So my question was, who advises the counties, who quantifies what is termed as development in the county is responsible for that, Morara? That was my question, actually, Latif. And where is this information found? Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Mariam, the best person to respond to that will be Bonnie, who's been looking at the counties.
Sorry. Bonnie was speaking. Yes.
Yeah, Bonnie, yes. Bonnie, you can respond to that.
Happy to answer that. So the question you asked is a very important question. And there's no law, there's no guideline that tells these people what's development. I mean, the idea is used to be common sense, right? To me, the premise of development is we are equipping the people with the ability to attract investment. We are basically setting up the county for growth, right? So things like infrastructure, things like communication networks, things like roads, right? Things like utilities that are there, power, things like that. But when you really look at these counties and the way they're spending your money, oftentimes they change things at the end to make sure that they fit into the law. So, for example, I've seen counties where they buy fertilizer, right? And they might call it recurring expenditure, but then at the end of the fiscal year, when they see that it's going to be over 70%, all of a sudden they call it, development. I was just going over the example of the county of Sierra, right? You cannot tell me that.
Be clarified, Grace.
If we look at education sector, teachers are not paid well. To an extent, the government has not released the medical cover for teachers. So if generally we look at teaching, at education in general, it looks like buying yourself a Range Rover, and you know very well you cannot afford to maintain the Range Rover, you cannot afford to fuel it, and that is what is happening in our education sector. This system of education, I think the government was trying to implement it, but again, because it is very expensive, the government is not in a position to establish it. Because if we have schools, children learning under the tree, and we want to implement CBC that actually needs practical work most of the time, and also more teachers with less students in the classroom, then it means that this system actually, it's a charade, it's not working. That is number one on this education sector. Number two, if you check the newspaper of yesterday, it is said that most of NHIF workers, managers, don't have a Form 4 certificates. And the ones that have a Form 4 certificate, they are forged. So you can see the kind of regime we are dealing with, which cannot even respect the aspect of education as equalizer, and also does not give people who really deserve to be there opportunities to be there to lead or to work. Last but not least, I also want to talk about where Kenya has to pay 14 billion extra in pipeline construction deal. This is when Treasury failed to release the money that was supposed to be compensated to the people who gave their land to the government, and the contractor is charging around 2-point-something million each and every day. So as much as we want this accountability, the first sector that we should be attacking is the Treasury. And they should be telling us, why are they not releasing money on time? That is first question that we should be asking them. Secondly, when they fail to release money, like the way I saw it last week, is when they were releasing 30 billion shillings to the counties. So it means right now we have a constitutional crisis, and the Treasury cannot really account for our money. So those are the questions that we should be asking ourselves. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Thank you very much for that input. Chris, you have the mic for 2 minutes.
Hello, good evening.
Go ahead.
Hope you're seeing me. Hope you are. Okay. First of all, I want to thank Morara. I want to thank Boni, and I want to thank you, Latif. You know, we are at a point where, as a country, we were given two options that were not good for us. I didn't vote for Ruto. I voted for Raila. But over the course of the last 2 years, I've realized he wasn't an option for us. I don't regret it, but I want people to take this issue with civil education so serious, because we have reached a point where the corruption in this country is at a level that you can't imagine. Nothing is working. I believe every country has its own issues, but at the moment, you audit every county. I have been going through the books of Auditor General's report regarding Busia County, where I come from. You can see how people, or I'll say organized crime on public finances happens. People are just stealing day in, day out. There is no report that you will find that is here. Every report has issues. Money can't be accounted for, and yet we are paying taxes for it. Every individual now getting out from school, be it in a college, be it in an university, be it in a TVET institution, there is no work, and that is the reality. And anybody getting work, it is the payment is pathetic. You can't keep up with providing for yourself. I remember another MP in Tanzania was talking about issue of ministers and government telling people to employ themselves. Aliuliza ni simple. Wewe mwenyewe uko na miaka 40. Umerudi kwa wananchi wa kuandike kazi, umekampeni ukashinda kura. Hao vijana wa miaka 20, miaka 18 unawaambia wajiandike wenyewe. Watoe wapi hiyo uwezo ya kujiandika kama wewe mwenyewe ulifikisha miaka 40 na ulishindwa kujiandika kazi? So the reality is...
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's leave it there. So we can take as many comments and participants as possible so we can continue this conversation more. Robert, you have the next 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Me, mine is just to thank you, Mora. Keep doing the